Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Welcome to Get Real with Shameeza. I'm your host, Shameeza Ali, and it is truly a pleasure being here with you this evening. A very good evening to everyone joining us on Facebook, YouTube, and on Island Zone Radio. Our community has been overwhelmed with concerns about deportation since November 5th. Tonight, we will address those concerns and speak to an attorney who will clarify the truth and the facts. You will meet Attorney Indera Demine. But first, let's do a giveaway. Our giveaway is compliments of Bidesi Caribbean food specialist serving our community for over 40 years. It's a winter box filled with goodies to make your winter a little more festive. Now, here's your chance. 2 weeks ago, we spoke to Rohan Narain. What is the name of his book? The question is again, 2 weeks ago, we spoke to Rohan Narain. What is the name of his book? Please share this important.
Flamingo Restaurant and Mantra Lounge. We are NYC's premier Caribbean restaurant and lounge, specializing in authentic West Indian, Chinese, and Caribbean cuisine. Open every day for lunch and late nights. For delivery, find us on Uber Eats, Grubhub, Seamless, and DoorDash. Visit our rooftop lounge upstairs on the weekends for a fun-filled night. We cater and take bookings for private events. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Flamingo Mantra. Our address is 120-06 Rockaway Boulevard, telephone 7188351000.
She's an attorney and she with over 10 years of experience. She and her husband, they manage their own immigration law firm. Please welcome Indera Demine.
Hi, Shameeza. It's so
Evening,
nice to
Indera.
Hi, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's a little bit cold in Florida, not quite like New York cold, but we call 60 and 70 degrees cold here in Florida. So,
And we will do anything to have 60s and 70s here. Like I will be okay if New York stayed in 60s and
right?
70s the entire year. But
Exactly. So I'm
hey,
not
that's just
complaining.
me. Yeah, we're not. Yeah, I'm sure. Don't complain. Well, I want to first of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time. I know you have so much going on as well. You know, being an attorney is one, but with kids and everything that you have going on, I want to take this time to thank you for being here this evening because it's something that we've been trying to do now. I've reached out to you. I'm like, our community is going
Right?
crazy because there's
Yeah.
so much questions and so much concerns about this new administration and what it means when they speak of deportation. So before we
Yes.
get into it, for anyone who is watching you, I know this is not your first time on Get Real, but for anyone who hasn't seen you before, can you introduce yourself or reintroduce yourself to us?
Sure. I'm Indira Demine. I'm Guyanese born. I came to the United States when I was 15, lived in New York for a while, and then came to Florida for law school. I met my husband right after law school, and so I ended up staying in Florida. I began practicing immigration law about 12 years ago, and I just fell in love with it. You know, I come from a family of immigrants, and at one point in my life, I was an undocumented immigrant. And so for me, It is a personal story. I identify with my clients, and I find immigration law quite rewarding when you help someone gain legal status from the moment someone holds their social or their work permit and their green card. It's such a rewarding feeling. And so, yeah, it's something I'm passionate about. We assist folks in all areas of immigration. So everything from family petitions to removal defense, representing them in court proceedings, also investor visas, employment visas, anything immigration related, that's my area.
Perfect. So for any one of you who are watching here tonight, I know in your last, which I believe was about 2 years ago, you were on the show, and we had several people who, as a matter of fact, back then we used to be on television in Guyana, and so many people saw that show and had family members or had their case pending and actually reached out. And we had a day that you specifically took and serviced all of our viewers.
Right. Yeah. And that's something we're open to doing. We're always looking, because I think, like you had said, there's so much misconception in the immigrant
Yes.
community. And so how do we get the right information out to folks? And so if we find that there is a need, and folks are reaching out to us with a need for just services on their case, we are more than happy to do something similar what we did last year, which is basically open up a day and said, for this day, we're going to waive all consultation fees if you have seen us on Get Real. And it worked really well, and we were able to really assist a lot of folks. And so, yeah, if we see that there is a need for that, we can, of course, bring that back.
Thank you so much. Well, tonight, in a few moments, the truth will be told as to if we do have people, because I know a lot of people are watching or they will rewatch it at a later time and they have questions, right? So if you're watching right now, if you're not the one with the questions, but you have family members or friends who might have questions, please share it, because it might save them maybe thousands of dollars taking an attorney or something like that, or they could simply see Indera and she can help them. So one of our biggest questions, one of the biggest questions that I get from viewers is, Shameeza, come January, what is going to happen to the people that are here illegal? And when we say illegal, we mean the people who came here that came here on a visa. This is what they're referring to. If they came here without the visa, they overstayed their visa. If they came here through the borders, right? We know what that is. Or they came here in any sort of way that was not a legal way. How does this affect them?
Okay, good question. And that's something we're hearing across the United States, right? The first thing I always remind folks is, there are thousands of people here that are undocumented. So logistically, picking up and rounding up folks and deporting them, that's not going to happen. And the main reason that's not going to happen is because the Immigration Nationality Act, the law says that if someone is picked up because they're a visa overstay or they entered the United States without inspection, the law says that they must go through the court proceedings and go through due process, right? See an immigration judge, present their case to the judge, and a judge decides whether or not that person should be deported. And so this idea that ICE is going to pick you up and round you up and deport you, it's simply not going to happen. Now, we have seen folks being picked up from their home. And why is that? That's because if someone is being picked up at their house or from their place of employment, that is because ICE has a warrant for their arrest. And so that means that person has an outstanding order of deportation already. But if you're simply a visa overstay, you've lived under the radar, really, they're not looking for you, right? Because there are thousands of folks that are undocumented, what we're seeing that is going to happen is ICE is going to prioritize who is the highest priority for deportation? That always starts with the border, right? People that are now entering and crossing over the border. Second group of folks, people that have criminal history, right? If you've been arrested for something, especially a serious crime, then you are a high priority for removal or deportation. And then third, folks that already have orders of deportation and are still living in the US, right? And so if you're simply a visa overstay, while you should still be concerned because you could be placed in deportation proceedings, I simply don't see ICE rounding people up and deporting them, because that's not what the law says that they can do.
When you speak of criminal acts, right?
Yes.
Like, what exactly does that consist? Like, what exactly
Good question.
people are
Yeah.
concerned about that?
So, I'll tell you, here in Florida, if you drive without a license, which is one of the main ways someone ends up in deportation, and why? Because you got to get to work, you got to take your son to school, you got to live. And we just don't have public transportation the same way we have in New York. So in Florida, one of the main ways people end up in deportation proceedings is by driving without a license. Now, I don't believe we have the same issue up in the north in New York, because you're able to get a license or drive lawfully or take public transportation. But any act that is against the local, state law or federal law, right? Any act against local, state, or federal law can place you in deportation proceedings. And so what ends up happening, I'll give you an example. You're pulled over, you have a broken headlight, and you get pulled over, and the police says, I want to see your driver's license. Well, I don't have one. In the state of Florida, you can be arrested for not having a driver's license. Now, when you're placed in custody, what happens is ICE runs a check on everybody that's in custody and places an ICE hold if you're in custody. Now, what that ICE hold says, it's telling the jail, if that person bonds out, they're coming to ICE. Or if that person is done with their criminal case, they're coming to ICE. And so they place an ICE hold on you so that once you're done with that criminal case, you're transferred over to ICE custody. However, you're not just transferred over and, remain in ICE custody for, months and months. The law says that you have the ability to motion an immigration judge for a bond, right? And so within a couple of weeks, you can have a bond hearing in front of a judge where you're presenting a motion and presenting a packet that outlines all of the reasons why bond should be granted.
Perfect. Now, what are your rights? Many people are living in fear that ICE is going to come to their door, knock on their door, and just arrest them. What can someone, you're in your home and you hear a knock, a few people identify themselves as, ICE members of ICE,
Okay.
What can a person do, or what is my right as a person living here in the US? What should I do?
Okay, good question. In order for law enforcement to enter your home, they must have a warrant and to enter your home. And so, and that usually we do not, immigration judges do not issue warrants to enter a person's home. So the first thing that you want to, if someone is knocking at your door, do not open it. What I would suggest is you ask who it is. Say, if you have a warrant, show it to me. Slide it under the door, or say, I'm simply not going to open my door. You are not obligated by law to open the door. Now, like I said, ICE will not come knocking on folks' door unless there is a reason to do so. And most of the time, the reason for that is that person or someone in that house or someone's last known address at that house had an outstanding order of deportation, and ICE is executing that arrest warrant, right? What most of the time happens, though, is not that ICE picks you up at your home. What ends up happening a lot of times is ICE will pick you up in a public space, on the bus, right? If you're on the bus, a Greyhound bus, The law says that law enforcement, including immigration or local police, they have the right to do what's called a Terry stop, where they have the right to ask for identification. And so if you're in public places, the bus, I haven't seen it happen on the train, but potentially it could, given enforcement priorities moving forward. But if you're in any public spaces, airports, on the road, in a bus, on a train, you are subject to being asked to show identity document, right? And sometimes that identity document, you show a passport, and that opens up a line of question. Oh, I see your Guyanese passport. Do you have legal status? And then that opens up a line of question, and now you're being taken into custody. So I would say if you are in a public space, you always want to have an identity document on you, but you also want to not do anything to draw attention to yourself, break the law. If you know you're driving on the road, do not speed. Do not have a broken tail light or headlight. Make sure your tints are not too dark. So do not give them a reason to pull you over, right? And
Don't drink and drive.
Don't drink and drive. Exactly.
Great thing. Now, I know, and I don't know if it's still in place, but I do remember DACA, which was available.
Yes.
And we spoke about it last time you were on. And I remember it being extended under this current administration that is out in January.
Yes.
Is DACA still available, and what does it mean with the new administration?
Okay, good. And so DACA is still available for folks that had DACA already. Now, so DACA was in litigation for many years, lawsuits were filed, and then the federal court came down with a decision. But basically what happened with DACA is the court said, if you already had DACA, you can renew your DACA, but USCIS is not allowed to grant first-time DACA applicants, right? And so you could not file DACA for the first time now, but you can certainly renew your DACA still.
Got it. Now, what does this mean for current visa applicants? Not necessarily. So, for example, let's say I have family members in Guyana.
Okay.
And I'm sponsoring a family member.
Right.
Let's say I'm sponsoring my son.
Okay.
What does the administration, what does it mean? How does it affect those sponsorships?
Okay. There are some things that that the president or the executive branch, or this administration, I should say, can do, and there's some things that they simply cannot do because it's already part of the law, and so it requires Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, to change the law, right? And so right now, the way the law is written, it says that every fiscal year, so every year, there is a limited number of visas given out for each visa category. So let's say I'm a US citizen and I'm sponsoring my adult child from Guyana. He's married and he has 2 kids. Well, that category would be US citizens petitioning for adult married child. Well, there's a limited number of visas in that category. Let's say I'm a US citizen sponsoring an adult unmarried child. Well, there's a limited number of visas in that visa category. Now, those numbers that, and they're in the thousands, right? There's a few thousand visas in this category, a few thousand visas in this category, but those numbers were set over 20 years ago, back in the 90s, when the Immigration Nationality Act was ratified. And so, but what we found over the last 20 something years is that immigration trend have increased, right? So the number of applicants have gone up, but the number of visas available hasn't gone up. And so what has happened is that you find that there's this backlog, right? Where people qualify for the visa, but there's no visa to give. And so that has created this extensive backlog. And basically, it has created this line where in order to get to the front of the line, you must wait an exceptional long time. In fact, if you are a Mexican national, say you're from Mexico, you sponsor your adult child, who you're a U.S. citizen. Say you're a U.S. citizen, you're sponsoring your adult child from Mexico. That petition is going to take 20 years. That is currently the backlog right now. And so when I think of legal immigration, to me, that is the area that needs to be looked at. And that is the area that needs to be reformed, because you have thousands of people that are in line waiting for their visas, and there's just no visa number available. And, Shameeza, the bottom line is the U.S. relies on the immigrant workforce. So, and so, but to get to your question, what happens to those folks? I don't foresee anything changing in that aspect, because in order for that to change, we would need to have Congress change that. And what this administration is talking about is using executive action, using the presidential powers to make immigration changes. So not necessarily involving Congress to change the law.
But we have seen during President Trump last reign as president, we have seen him try to change certain rules. For example, he has spoken about turning people that were kids that was born here, not making them citizens, and possibly, sending them and their parents back to their country. We've heard of these things. We've heard him say these things,
Yes.
Is this possible?
And taking away birthright citizenship, which is something that this administration has talked about extensively, taking away birthright citizenship, and so is that possible? One of the things that I recognize with politics is that almost anything is possible. And so, and especially because in the past, we've seen the Democratic Party having control over the House of Representatives, while, or maybe they have control over the Senate. But in this administration, the incoming they have control over the House and the Senate, which tells me that it's going to be a lot easier to pass laws, because you don't need to have the other party agree when you have a majority, right? And so, is it possible? I wouldn't say it's impossible. It's certainly possible. I think that there's going to be such uproar that there's going to be lawsuits filed. Nothing in immigration moves very quickly, because the only thing that I think would immediately occur is border security. Because when you talk about border security, you talk about national security, right? And so this immediate need to sort of control the border. So I definitely think that is one of the first things we're going to see. As far as though ending birthright citizenship, as soon as that's announced, there's going to be a lawsuit filed. That's going to be tied up in litigation for a very long time. That issue may make its way to the Supreme Court. Something as serious as that is going to take more than just an announcement, right? There's going to be such serious uproar because we're talking about millions of people that would be affected, right? And so while it's possible, I definitely don't think it's going to be an overnight thing that's going to happen as soon as this administration takes over.
Perfect. We will take questions from our viewers in a few minutes. We'll take a break in a little bit, and then we'll come back with questions from our viewers. So if you have someone that you know might have questions and they're not currently watching, please get them to watch, share it, give them a call, say, hey, you need to watch, you need to ask your questions. You're basically getting complimentary answers to your questions right now. And I think that you guys should really, make the most out of it. Speaking of, the current administration, when I speak of the current administration, we're speaking as of January next month. The Trump administration will be in full effect. And, with the recent elections, Indera, I know for many of us, like I said, here in New York, I don't know what the feeling is like in Florida, but many Guyanese here in New York, I feel like, for weeks, New York was completely, you can go to Liberty Avenue, there was no one on the streets. Like
Right.
the fear that was instilled in them, I feel like people are so uncertain. uh should they be uncertain? Should they have these feelings? It's the holidays. What can we say to them to make them know that they have rights and they should just continue to live their life?
Yeah, a similar feeling here in Florida. One of the things that we did as a law firm is that we prepared for the day after the election. And no matter who had won, I knew there was going to be a ton of phone calls. If the Democrats had won, I would have folks calling, "What's the new immigration policy?" And so we were inundated with phone calls with folks wanting to know, what's going to happen. Is he going to stop my current case? Am I going to? And so a lot of uncertainty for sure. What I would say is you want to have a good understanding of where your case is, right? Because a lot of times people may qualify for something, but they're too afraid to find out or to pursue their case. And they believe that if they do so, I'm putting myself in more danger. So they live under the radar and try to be quiet. I think that can only get you so far, right? At the end of the day, the goal should be, how do I gain legal status in the US? And what are the steps do I need to take in order to do that? And I know this because I see it all the time. People get taken advantage of, right? And you may go to someone that files something for you that you may not qualify for. That also happens quite often, where someone files something because, I hear that if you go there and you file so and so, you'll get a work permit. And so folks will file something that they may not qualify for. I'm not saying to do that. I'm not saying to file things just to file something, but you want to have, and that requires having competent legal counsel. But you do want to be informed about your case. And when I say competent legal counsel, a lot of times what we see, and because a lot of immigration is form filling, a lot of it, if you're filing a family petition, it's a form. And so because of that, there is such what's called unlawful practice of law in the field of immigration. And so unlawful practice of law is anyone that's representing you as legal counsel, but is not legally authorized to do so. They're not licensed to do so. And because a lot of immigration is form filling, a lot of times you think if I go to a document preparer, they can fill my form and I pay less and I get it filed and that might be true to an extent that, yeah, you're paying less, but you want to make sure that what you're filing is something you qualify for. You want to make sure that you have a good understanding of your case, and you're because a lot of immigration cases take years, right? And so you want to understand, where do I start? What are all the steps do I need to take? And then finally, you want to make sure you're maintaining good moral character, like we talked about. Don't drive drunk. Don't break the law. And you want to file taxes. There's a misconception that if I don't file taxes, nobody knows I'm here. But let me tell you, if you end up in deportation proceedings, it's a lot more difficult for me to represent someone who's never filed taxes than it is to represent someone who's filed 10 years of taxes, right? I can look at a judge and say, Your Honor, he has contributed over 10 years into Social Security. This is someone who is deserving of a bond, right? And so this idea that, okay, I don't file taxes, nobody knows where I am, it only gets you so far. What if they find out where you are? What if you're picked up? So you want to show that you have made positive impacts on your local community, whether that is filing your taxes, owning a small business, purchasing a home, things like that, to show this has become a part of my community. Paying your bills, showing that you're financially responsible, taking care of your children, things like that. I think that if you show that you're a person of good moral character, at the end of the day, you're seeing a a person. A judge is a person, and they look at you and say, okay, this is a person who's trying to make a life in the US. Okay, he or she broke the law by coming to the US, but they did so in search of a better life. And during that time they've been in the US, look at all of the things that they've accomplished. Shameeza, I am always so surprised when I see how much immigrants are able to achieve with little or nothing. How much they're able to accomplish with just this idea and this dream of achieving the American dream, right? And so that's what I would say, is encouraging folks to be the best you can be, present the best you can present, and file taxes and not break the law.
And I can see how much easier that will make your life and their
Right.
life. Like that case, you say, hey, judge, look, they've done all of these things, and you present all of that proudly, right? Rather than
Right.
having to say, yeah, not only are they illegal, but they've committed, and the list of
List
things
goes
being
on and on,
on
and
and
oh no,
on. It's almost like I don't really want to take the case and waste your money. Keep
exactly.
going.
Exactly. And that, I can't tell you how many times I have that conversation where I said, look, I
Yeah.
don't see I'm going to get a bond here. Right. And so, one of the things I get asked is about public benefits. Right. And if you have a US citizen child, technically that US citizen child is eligible for public benefits, such as food stamps or whatever they may qualify for. So I do get asked that question all the time. Should my US citizen child take advantage of a public benefit? Legally, they can. Legally, yes. But if you have the financial ability, I would never say, have a child go hungry. But if you have the financial ability to take care of your children and your household, it's so much easier to present that case than it is because that's one of the questions they ask. If you apply for something called cancellation of removal, if you're in deportation proceedings, you've lived in the United States for 10 years and you have US citizen children, you can apply for something called cancellation of removal. On the application is that question about public benefit. And so you want to show that you're self-sufficient. Look, I may have come to the United States, but not for a benefit. I came to the United States in search of a better life. And in the time I've been here, I've contributed to the United States instead of taking, right? And so things like that you want to be aware of. You want to be mindful of what you're doing and what are the footprints you're leaving in the US.
Yeah, and I do want to remind, because I have had the opportunity to sponsor many family members to come to the US. I did it all by myself. So it's like I know the questions now, and I know all of the things that they look for when you're filing these cases. I do want to remind folks as well, when you bring someone to the US, so if you sponsor a family member, they come to the US, it's one of the things that if they come here and they apply for food stamp as soon as they get here, or medical insurance and that type of thing, it does go on your record when you're in.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and it's also if you're about to file a case, and you yourself was in a tough position, you had those. They do ask all of these questions, so
Yes.
keep those things in mind as well. It,
Yes. And Shameeza, one of the things that I think has changed over time is what it means to be an immigrant. I feel like when you immigrated, there is this idea that in America, I can achieve my wildest dream. I don't want to take something from America. I want to work hard and provide for myself and make something of myself. I feel like within the last few years, this concept has changed and I think part of it probably has to do with some of the benefits, public benefits. If you come across the border, you're then given a place to stay and money or whatever it may be, right? And so the type of immigrants or that are crossing the border and their expectation has changed over time from I'm coming here just to work and provide for myself to I expect to have housing and provided to me and so on. And especially in northern states. I know for sure in New York, where it's mandated in your local laws that immigrants housing is provided to immigrants, right? And so and I think that has left a sour taste in people's mouth when it comes to immigrants, right? This idea, oh, they're taking from us, right? But that's not how it always was, or what it means to be an immigrant, right? And I think that we need to go back to this idea of coming to United States not to take something, but to contribute and to make something. Because I do believe that here we have opportunities. You can come from, my dad was a rice farmer in Myconi Creek. I come from no running water, no electricity, and so this idea that you can achieve your wildest dream is still possible. And so that's the type of mindset I think we need to have as immigrants, not necessarily what's the free thing that I can take advantage of, right? Because it really, and it affects how people see immigrants as well.
Absolutely. I think in the recent, probably the last 2 years here in New York, we as immigrants, we look at the migrants that have come across the border with all of the fancy hotels that we who live here work hard cannot afford
Right.
those hotels. They've been housed there and they didn't show any gratitude. I mean, the food that they were given was not good enough. They had to be given vouchers and carts to get their own food. The mess that they left, it
Which
just
is
has,
crazy. Like, what
yeah.
that you're giving, and I do think that like here in Florida, we don't have any any sort of program like that. And what ended up happening was, for many years, Texas and all of these bordering states were bearing the brunt of the immigrants crossing the border. Well, a few years ago, Texas said, we're going to send these people to what they call sanctuary cities, or more immigrant friendly cities. And so we saw thousands of immigrants being bused to places that never saw immigrants before. Denver, Colorado, right? Utah, New York, Washington, D.C., like areas that don't necessarily see an influx of immigrants. And so all of a sudden, New York has thousands of immigrants being bussed in on a daily basis. And because of New York's laws, now we got to provide housing. Now we got to have the food vouchers. Now we have to do all of this, which has put a burden on the system. But it's also affected how other immigrants look at these incoming immigrants, and how society looks at what it means to be an immigrant.
Well, we have a major problem here in New York. The mayor has reached out to the current administration and is seeking help. As of today, he is in discussion as to how he can make things right in terms of our migrant situation here in New York. It's going to be an interesting one, because after probably millions or billions of dollars given out to these folks, of our taxpayer dollars, we have a major crisis here in New York, and it'll be interesting to see how this goes down. But in the meantime, please ask your questions. And while you do, we will take a quick break. I do want to remind you guys that this Sunday at Mantra, we will have Santa is coming there to give out little gifts to our little ones, and there will be lots of goodies and toys. So bring out your kids and let's have fun this Sunday at Mantra. All right, guys, here is a quick message.
Flamingo Restaurant and Mantra Lounge. We are NYC's premier Caribbean restaurant and lounge, specializing in authentic West Indian, Chinese, and Caribbean cuisine. Open every day for lunch and late nights. For delivery, find us on Uber Eats, Grubhub, Seamless, and DoorDash. Visit our rooftop lounge upstairs on the weekends for a fun-filled night. We cater and take bookings for private events. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Flamingo Mantra. Our address is 120-06 Rockaway Boulevard, telephone 7188351000.
All right, we are back, Indera. As an attorney, what is your advice to our illegal, right? When I say illegal, it's a very wide range of folks that are here in the US. What is your advice to them?
Good question. It depends. It depends on a few things. When I meet with an undocumented immigrant, depending on how they entered the United States, if they crossed the border, or if they came on a boat, or if they entered with a visa, entered with someone else's passport, their manner of entry is very important, because the manner of your entry will determine what, if anything, you qualify for, right? And so the first thing I would say is you want to understand what may be your pathway to legal status, and if you do have a pathway to legal status. If you do not have a pathway to legal status, especially moving into this new administration, I recommend having a plan in place. Just recently, I had to have a conversation with a Chinese national. He is in the US by himself. Wife and children are in China. He's lived here now for about 20 years. He owns a restaurant. He has employees, but he also had an asylum that he filed that was denied. And so he has an order of deportation. And so I had to have a conversation with him that, yeah, you will be in danger of deportation because you have an outstanding warrant for your arrest. We can assume if you have an order of deportation, you have an outstanding warrant for your arrest. So now, sir, you must start thinking about, how am I, if I am picked up by ICE, how am I going to get the money out of my bank account? How am I going to sell the car, close my restaurant, sell my house? All of these assets that you've acquired over time. Let's say he had a child here in the US. Who am I going to leave in as guardian for my child? So these are real questions you have to start thinking about and having an answer in place. And I know it's worrisome to have to think about, if I'm deported, am I going to take my child with me or not? Am I going to leave my child with someone to take care of? If I'm deported, who can access my bank account? And I know these are not things that are happy thoughts, but these are questions you should be asking. And be realistic about what are all the possibilities. And so I tell folks, you want to have a power of attorney in place, and you want to have those conversations with family members. You want to have a plan in place. Am I going to take my child or not? If I'm deported, what am I going to do? So that you're not sitting in custody, but no one can access any of your assets because no one has the means to, right? And all of these years you've saved and you've built, and now no one can access any of it, right? So just things like that you want to have in place. And then if there are, a lot of folks that I speak with, they may have a pathway to legal status, but it's going to take years. And so a lot of times they're like, well, I'm not going to do that because it's going to take 10 years. And you know what? The time keeps moving and they're still undocumented. And before you know it, oh, look, the 10 years did pass, right? So don't be discouraged by the length of time it's going to take you to get legal status, because it's better than no status. And in immigration, if you qualify for 10 things, you can apply for 10 things. So just because a process is going to take 10 years or 5 years, and a new process came out that you may qualify for, you're not disqualified from the new process. You can take advantage of that as well. And so I see folks that are not willing to put in the time because they're, oh, that's going to take too long. All right, I'm going to what, stay in the same status. And then finally, there is a process. Let's say you entered the United States. It's called entry without inspection and EWE entry. Any person that entered without inspection, crossed illegally from Canada, crossed the border, came on a boat, used someone else's passport, you were not inspected, stamped, and given an I-94 record of your legal entry or paroled into the US. So anyone entered without inspection. Let's say you got married to a US citizen. Well, because you entered without inspection and you do not have an I-94 record of your legal entry, technically you cannot adjust your status in the US. You can't just marry a US citizen and get a green card in the US. There is a process and a pathway for you, but it's going to take about 5 to 6 years. And the final step, you have to return to do an interview in your home country. And just today, I had a conversation with a Guyanese national, and I said, it's a 3-step process. Step 1, your spouse would have to file a petition for you called an I-130 petition. That petition takes 6 to 8 months right now. Step 2, after that petition is approved, you have to file a waiver. Why? Because you must waive that illegal entry and that illegal presence in the US. That waiver right now is taking about 3.5 years. And that's where I lose folks because they're like, I don't want to wait that long, right? 3.5 years. But this is the process to legal status. So step 1 is the petition, step 2 is the waiver, and then step 3, this is the step where I really lose people. Step 3 is that you must return to your home country for an interview. The question I get asked all the time is, how do I know if I return for an interview, I'm not going to get stuck in the home country? Valid question. If your only reason for being stuck in the home country is because you acquired unlawful presence, basically you lived here illegally, well, you've already waived that by filing that waiver. And so even though it's scary to return to the home country, the risk is no longer there. Now, if there are complications, let's say you entered multiple times. This is true for people from Mexico because they may go back and forth between Mexico and the US. If you have multiple illegal entries, well, that creates a ground for you to be denied. Let's say you have criminal history. Well, that creates a ground for you to be denied. Let's say you filed a fraudulent document with immigration. Well, that creates another ground for you to be denied. But if you came backtrack, you came with somebody, crossed the border, or you came from Canada, and that is your only ground of removability, that ground of removability is waived by filing that waiver.
Thank you so much. I can see the price for those marriage visas going up ridiculously. And,
Yes.
we haven't heard about those visas in years. I don't know if there was no need because people were coming, there. I haven't heard about people paying somebody 10 or 20 or 30. I don't even know what the price is at this
Yes,
time.
yes.
I feel like this would be the time that people are going to start saying, hey, give me 50,000.
Right, right. And you know what? Probably the reason why you haven't been hearing about it is because marriage fraud, the risk of being found out that you've committed marriage fraud is so high.
Right.
You can expect immigration to investigate your marriage. And so things have definitely shifted over the years. You no longer can say, oh, yeah, I'm married so and so. Now we have social media. Now we have the internet. Now, I can't tell you how many times immigration looks up a person, not just a background check, but look up their social media accounts. Look up, and so it is a lot easier these days to find out whether or not a marriage is real or not. And so because of that, I think we're seeing less and less of that happening.
Definitely. Question in regards to a US citizen living in another country and wants to sponsor a fiance or wife but is not currently here in the US. Is that possible? And what are the proceedings for that?
Good question. So, a petition, so if you file a sponsorship for someone, it's usually, and that person is outside of the country. So let's say I'm a US citizen. I've lived in Guyana for the last 10 years. I got married to a Guyanese, and now I want to come back to the US with my Guyanese spouse. Can I sponsor them? Yes is the short answer, but the longer answer is you must be domiciled here when they're ready to come to the US. So if you sponsor someone, it's a two-step process if they're outside of the US. Step one is you file the I-130 petition. When you file that I-130 petition, you may be domiciled outside of the US. That's not a problem. But when that I-130 petition is approved and they're ready for what's called consular processing, so they go into the US consulate in Guyana to do their interview, there is a requirement that the petitioner who is filing that affidavit of support on their behalf be domiciled in the US. Now, there's no requirement that they may have to be domiciled for a year or 6 months or 5 years, but they must have reestablished their domicile in the US, whether that's a few months, but you have to show, look, they have a driver's license, and so they're now living, they have a US address, they've reestablished their domicile in the US.
And do they have to show taxes in the US?
Yes. So if you are a petitioner, there is a requirement that you file an affidavit of support for your beneficiary, whoever you're sponsoring. Now, there is a requirement, and when you file an affidavit of support, you must include your latest tax return and your W-2. So if you declare $60,000 on your taxes, they want to know, where did you get that $60,000? So they want to see your W-2 or 1099 or K-1 schedule. How did you get that $60,000? Now, it doesn't mean that if you're retired, you couldn't sponsor someone. So you can use what's called alternative sources of income if you're not required to file taxes. Now, if you haven't filed taxes, you must explain why. And so my income was not high enough, and so I was not required to file taxes is one reason. I'm retired, and therefore I'm not required to file taxes. That's another reason. I haven't worked, so I'm not required to file taxes. That's fine. In that case, if you weren't required to file taxes, you can have a joint sponsor. So someone who is a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident, a green card holder, join you in sponsoring the immigrant.
Perfect. Well, that said, I do hope that if you're retired, you do not want to sponsor anyone and bring them to the US through marriage. That is my little take for tonight. I don't see any questions, so I think people are rest assured. You're doing very well because no one has questions right now. So you're answering all the questions that they probably have.
And because immigration is such a personal matter, and given this atmosphere right now, I can see folks just not being comfortable sharing in a public forum, and that's okay. Recently over the summer, we did this summer series where we went out in churches. We don't have temples here. I would have done temples or mandirs, but we went out to churches and met with folks from Spanish-speaking churches, Creole-speaking churches, English-speaking churches, and did immigration presentation. And I found a similar hesitation to, raise your hand and say, hey, I have so-and-so. So I understand that hesitation. And so what I would say is, if you have a question and you just don't feel comfortable asking, you can always ask. You can email me, you can reach out to my office, and we can have my contact information so that they can do so.
Indera, can you tell them how they can reach out to you, your email, your phone
Yes.
number?
Yes.
Guys, take a moment, grab a pen, or you can rewatch us at any time. But here is Indera's information.
Yes. So we have 2 offices. Both are in Florida. Because I'm licensed in Florida, I can't. Immigration law is federal, and so I can represent someone anywhere in the United States. And so if you want to reach out to us, our phone number is 239-208 2680. And that's our main phone number for our Fort Myers office. If you wish to email me, which sometimes it's easier to get a hold of me if you email me, because I'm checking my email daily, all day. And if it's a simple question, I'm more than happy to answer. If it's sometimes a question can seem simple, but I have to ask five other questions to be able to answer your question, I would say, I think I'd need a consultation. So if you want to email me, my email is my first name, Indera, and that's INDERA at Demine, DEMINE, immigration, IMMIGRATION.com. So it's Indera at DemineImmigration.com.
Very good, Indira. And with closing tonight,
Yes.
Indira, I do want to thank you for taking the time to be here this evening. I also want to wish you and your beautiful family a very happy holiday. I know you were in Guyana recently and you had such an amazing time. I felt like I was there with you because you took us on that entire journey with you,
Yes.
and you did so much adventurous stuff. And I saw the boys with you. It was such a it was so nice to
It
watch you
was,
create memories with the boys.
it was really good for me to take the kids back. My kids were born here. My husband is from here, and so it was one of those trips that really showed them where I came from, Mycone Creek to Annandale Primary School to Good Fate, Mycone, all the areas, and we went everywhere. And it was a really, really, really good trip. And so, yeah, I hope to do it again.
Definitely. I hope that, because I know my inbox starting from tonight is going to start getting questions. So I hope that maybe a day, if not before the end of this year,
Yes,
maybe in January, because I know you're closing off a little bit too. You have a lot going on in your life. So maybe if not in December, maybe in January, we can set aside one day where you
definitely.
guys can have consultation with Indira. We will work together and figure that out.
Yes,
But in the meantime, guys, if you have questions, she just shared her information. Please reach out to Indira and she'll be able to consult and give you the right information. All right, Indira, thank you so much for joining us
thank
and
you for having
have
me.
a happy holiday.
Happy holidays.
And guys, tonight we heard from Indira. It was truly, truly a pleasure having Indira on the show with you guys. I hope that you can rest a little bit more peaceful, knowing that you are protected somewhat. And based on the information, I don't know if you missed it. If someone's knocking at your door, is what she said. If someone knocking at your door and they said they're from ICE or they're representing ICE, you have a right not to open your door. Ask to see. The simple thing to do is not open your door, and that is your right to not open your door. You can also ask to see a warrant. They have to have a warrant. Make sure that you protect yourself when you're out. Make sure you have proper identification on you, and also make sure that you stay out of things that you do not have a right to be in. That is unlawful things, unlawful procedures, anything that you should not be a part of right now. Please stay out of it. It will make your lives easier. And an attorney, if they have to ever represent you in a court of law, it will make their lives a little bit easier. All right, so that is the 2 cents that I was able to gather from tonight's show. But I hope that if you haven't seen it from the start, go back, take a look, share it, and you never know who might find value in what was said here tonight. Until next time, I am Shameeza Ali, and this is Get Real with Shameeza. Have a pleasant evening, everyone. Thank you.